Good evening. Welcome back to Northern Maine Productions. I got an interesting project I thought I would share with you guys on YouTube that I have never shared on here before. Back in June of 2016, I was struggling with my old AYP Craftsman lawnmower. Thing was just a piece of junk. The overhead valve Briggs & Stratton engine was having problems with it blew a head gasket, and I ran the thing dry oil. It started knocking after that. The deck was a piece of junk on that thing. Had trouble with belts and mandrels and batteries and starters, and I was just sick of that thing. Anyways, 31 years ago I started working in a local small engine shop here in Smyrna Mills. I worked there for about 7 years in the early 1990s. Back in those days, we were a Snapper dealer, and I serviced and worked on a lot of very old, even at that time, Snapper rear engine riders. And I kept thinking back to those machines, you know, when I had this old AYP, and I kept thinking, man, I wish I could find one of those old Snappers that were still in decent condition, because I remember, you know, back then you didn't ever have to work on them things very much. Occasionally I'd put a drive disc on them to sharpen the blades, tune them up in the spring, but geez, you'd never see them back and all summer long, you know, once you got them going for the summer. Very rarely was there ever any problems with those old things. So I kept thinking about that, and I thought, man, there's still got to be some of those kicking around in this area somewheres. So I got asking around, and lo and behold, I found 2 of them that were still fairly complete. A friend of mine that I work with had a couple of them. So I ended up getting them. I took them off their his hands, and I brought them home. And one of them, the engine was, I believe the engine was actually seized up on that machine when I brought it home, and the deck was rusted out in and around the mandrel. It was a mid-1980s Snapper. I think it was a 28-inch 8-horse machine. And then there was the other one that I brought home was much older. It was a 3081 WS, and that thing looked really bad when I brought it home. It was really rusty and really dirty because it had been in a barn for so many years. And apparently, talking to the guy, he said, well, he said it was running the last time it was used. However, I guess the guy's mother tried to gas the thing up when it was running or something. The battery was bad in it, and they just left it running once they got it started, and apparently gas leaked out of the thing and it caught fire, and it done some damage. I don't know if you guys are familiar with those old L-head Briggs & Stratton engines, but they had that little plastic piece that the throttle cable hooked on down there by the carburetor. Incidentally, this 3081 WS machine was about a 1975 vintage machine. However, it did not have the original engine on it. It had an early 1980s 8-horse Briggs on it. I'm not sure. I think it was an 8. I think the it was 1983 or something like that, which I didn't care anyways. They had a better governor system on them as far as I was concerned. I liked the way the governor was hooked up better on them, and it's got magnetron ignition system on it, so you don't have to frig around with points all the time. However, you know, 1983 was a long time ago too. That engine, it was pretty obvious it had a lot of running time on it. Anyways, I brought them home. I brought both those machines home, and I made my mind up I'd fix the older machine because it just seemed to be in a little bit better shape, and obviously the engine was mounted to it, and so I took two machines and I built one. There was some problems with the drive system, with the final drive on the 3081, as I found out shortly after I got it running. I don't think I have any pictures of it when I had that. I actually had to take the rear differential out of it. Somebody had that apart at a different time, and they left a thrust washer out on the right hand rear axle, and it allowed the hex shaft that the drive disc slides back and forth on to float back and forth too far in there, and it allowed the sprocket in the chain assembly to wear a hole out through the side of the chain case, and eventually the drive chain came off inside the differential. I wasn't too concerned about that. It flew all to pieces, and I looked it up, and obviously you can still get parts for the thing. They're a little bit expensive to buy parts for, but they're nowhere near as expensive as they were when they were owned, before they were owned by Briggs & Stratton. I believe Briggs & Stratton Corporation has lowered the prices of Snapper parts substantially. I remember back in the early 90s, parts were very expensive for Snapper lawnmowers. I'm not sure if they were owned by McDonough Power Equipment back then, or who they were owned by, but I took a whole bunch of photos of this old machine right from day one. I took pictures of disassembling it and repairing it, cleaning it up, and putting it back together, and I'll show them to you here in a slideshow. And I even have a few video clips that I'm going to put in this video. I actually have a clip of it the very first time I started and ran that machine. The governor wasn't even working on it at that time, but I was pretty surprised. It started up and it ran quite well. Anyway, stay tuned. I'll bring you some slides here, and we'll take a look at this old machine as she comes back from the dead, very slowly but surely. I worked on it, I think, a total of a couple of weeks after, nights after work out here in my garage, and I eventually started mowing grass with it right away, just as soon as I got it going, and I've used it every season since then. Looks to me like that probably 2021 is going to be a go too. It was running fine when I put it in the garage last fall, so anyways, enjoy these photographs, and I shall I may put some voiceovers on this yet, I don't know, but anyways, enjoy. Well, this is day one in June of 2016. This is how the old mower looked the day that I brought her home. She was a pretty sad looking sight. I took it in the garage and took it apart to investigate the fire damage and to clean the engine up some and get it ready to run. I had to change the back tires on it, obviously, because they were completely rotted out and would not hold air, not even with tubes. As you can see here, it still has the original old Briggs starter on it with a iron gear. This next little clip is when I started. That actually ran quite well. That was the first time that machine has been running in about 13 years, if I can tell. Here, I'm doing some repairs to the deck. The blade brake wasn't working that good on it, so I had to adjust that, and I had to adjust the belt. The belt was actually too tight on it. Then I changed the oil in the old girl. And this next picture shows the old machine the first day I took it out to mow with it. Didn't look very good, but it actually did work pretty well. I then took it over to my aunt's and mowed her hayfield for about 3 hours with it. These next clips I started cleaning the machine up a little bit, and I eventually did have to change both the front tires on it. I painted the rims on it, painted the gas tank, because the gas tank was all bleached out. I ran it for I think a whole season looking like that. Then in the summer of 2018, we gave it a complete paint job. Me and my nephew worked on it. He worked just as hard as I did sanding all that old rust off that thing. And then later on, I took a video of him out here in my backyard mowing with it. This shows just how easy it is to service the deck on this and sharpen the blade and work on the drive system. These machines are super easy to work on. Just tip it up. And here's my nephew helping me mow the back lawn with it. He was helping me demonstrate the old machine. It actually sounds good. So as you can tell, that was pretty much an overwhelming success, getting that old snapper running again. I'm trying to think I believe it was in the summer of 2017, I had it downtown mowing for the local historical society down here, which I did quite often for the first couple of seasons, and I hit a massive piece of iron with that thing, and I did cut the shaft off that holds the blade on that machine. That was a little bit pricey to fix that. I had to buy some new parts from Snapper to fix that, because the mandrel on that mid-1980s parts machine I had was quite a lot different. It didn't actually mount in there the same, so I did have an issue with the differential, like I said before. Not once, but twice. It actually did the same exact thing 2 different times. And I finally, after when it happened the second time, I discovered that's when I discovered that there was a thrust washer missing out of there. It was just a stupid oversight on my part the first time. I mean, it had been many years since I had worked on one of them, and I'm not even sure that I ever really took the drive system apart in one of them before, so I wasn't that familiar with that part of the machine, and I overlooked the fact that that washer was missing out of there, and it wore into the bushing on I believe it was on the left rear. It was opposite the differential, but it did cause some pretty bad damage to the case, and luckily I was able to obtain used parts to fix it both times it happened. The only other issue I've had with that is, of course, the typical carburetor issues with those old L-head Briggs and Strattons. Those old carburetors are old, and last spring when I dug it out, I of course I always run the fuel systems dry on them in the fall when I park them. And last spring when I dug it out, I had trouble with it flooding. You put gas in it and the gas would run right through it, and I actually had to take the carburetor off in there, and I took a Q-tip and some carb cleaner, and I had to actually kind of buff the seat out in the carburetor body where the needle valve seats, because there was actually a little bit of corrosion in there. Of course, it sits out in that garage in the winter time, and it's damp, and it gets warm and cold, and condensation, I suppose, formed in there. And of course, the alcohol in the gas doesn't help either, or ethanol, I mean. The only other thing that's really kind of a concern with that machine right now is, of course, that engine is old and it's got many hours on it. I've put a lot of hours on it myself, mowing with it, and it burns a lot of oil, especially if it's really hot day out and you're out working that thing really hard. I mean, you'll have a big cloud of smoke following you wherever you go if you're really working it, especially when it's idling. I suspect that probably the rings in the valve guides are pretty well wore out in that engine. I stay very diligent about keeping the oil filled up. I put straight 30 weight oil in it. In fact, I even tried diesel motor oil in it at one point in time, and it didn't really make any difference. I think I put 1540 diesel motor oil in it, and it started hard if it was a little bit cool. This summer when I dig it out, I don't know, I may just run it until it quits running, I don't know. But I know for sure this summer it's going to have a battery in it. I did put a new battery in it in 2016, and it worked pretty well for most of last summer, but towards the end of the summer, if you left it set, in the grass growing season, slowed down to only having to mow every 2 or 3 weeks. It was really dry last summer too, so it didn't get run a whole lot, and the battery wouldn't hold a charge. Usually when I'd have to go out and start it up after it sat there for 2 or 3 weeks, I'd have to hand start it with a crank. On another interesting note, I have another machine that's pretty much identical to that one. It's a 1971. That machine's complete and it does work, but it needs a new carburetor on it, and I'm going to try to get a new carburetor for that machine this summer, and I'm sure that probably when I do that, I'll probably upload some videos on that one also. I really hope you guys enjoyed this. I wish now that I would have actually taken some video of it when I was actually working on it, but I really wasn't into making YouTube videos about my home projects here at that point in time, so I hope you guys really enjoyed that. I hope you guys get some encouragement from it. I mean, if you see these old things laying out around, just because they look bad don't mean they're really the bad. They might run for several more years, you never know. I'm a big believer in recycling things, and as you've probably seen in my Aryan snowblower videos, I actually like older equipment. It's a lot simpler to work on, generally cheaper to maintain, and they're way more dependable. That little Snapper mower's built, it's just like a rock. I mean, them things are almost indestructible as long as you put them together and use them the way they're supposed to be used. Anyways, I'm going to leave you. I've run my mouth here long enough. I'll leave you guys and have a good evening.